Does the world need another 2-player card battler? Well, I'm gonna hopefully answer that for you by telling you everything that's unique about Power Core and whether or not you may want to back it. Before we begin, I just want to give a really quick shout out to Board&Dice for sending us this prototype to preview for you guys. How's it going, everyone? I am Dylan. This is All You Can Board. This is Power Core, and it's a 2-player card battling game that is up on crowdfunding. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about it to help you decide whether or not you want to back it. Now, obviously, 2-player card battler is probably the most important thing to know out of the gate because that is the reason I was interested in checking it out in the first place. I grew up on games like Magic the Gathering. I have a huge affinity for those 2-player card battling games, especially if they can do it in a way that sort of is self-contained in a box or doesn't quite need to be expanded on to be, you know, enjoyable and replayable. And so Power Core attracted me for a couple different reasons. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an overview of kind of a brief overview of the rules, how it plays, just so you can understand what you'd be doing in this game, whether that sounds good to you. And then I'm going to get into what makes this game unique. That's going to be the bulk of what I talk about in this video. I think that when we start talking about 2-player card battling games, at least for me, the thing I just want to know out of the gate is what makes it different. What sets it apart? Why should my attention be here instead of at a game like, you know, whatever it might be, Keyforge or Radlands or whatever. There's so many out there that are either self-contained or expandable. I think that's the biggest thing to try to help you decide whether or not you're going to back it. That's what I'm going to spend this video talking about. So let's jump in and I'm going to tell you exactly kind of how this plays and briefly I'll touch on some of the unique things in that kind of set Power Core apart. First thing I'm going to jump right into is just talk about the Power Cores themselves. So these Power Cores are kind of like the crux of the game and what makes it unique. Basically every single character, every single ally, almost every single card you're going to play in the battlefield aside from I think spells and maybe one other, I'm blanking, is going to have a Power Core attached to it. Power Cores, at least the ones from the general supply, will have a green side, 4 sides to them, and one side will be green, one side will be red. They'll always start on the green side and then be rotated clockwise during the Power Core step of each turn, which essentially means that every card has a limited lifespan unless you manipulate those Power Cores in some way, that once it gets to the red side, it's going to be discarded, the card and the Power Core, both gone. So they're temporary, you have to kind of utilize them as much as you possibly can before they're gone, or find a way to, you know, add to the longevity by rotating these Power Cores in the opposite directions. Your opponents may be trying to rotate them further clockwise to have them die quicker. It's one way to kill off people's cards. Every time you turn the Power Core to one of those sides, you're going to generate the resources that are on them. I think this is like step 2 of a turn, essentially. I've kind of jumped around here, but it's the name of the game. I felt like it was something important to talk about. You're going to generate the resources that are on them. Those resources might be damage tokens, they might be shield tokens, they might be horror tokens. This is one of the main ways you're going to deal damage in the game. You're going to generate a bunch of these damage tokens from your Power Cores across all your characters and allies, and they're going to be dishing them out either to your opponent's characters to try to win the game, or to the allies in play to help mitigate everything that they're trying to do and slow them down. That's a big source of your damage, a big way you're going to deal damage in this game, and one way that it's kind of is set apart from other games. You're not necessarily focusing all your effort on, I'm going to spend a bunch of my mana or whatever it is to play a card to be able to multiple times just kind of attack you, go for blocks, whatever. This one is more focused on these Power Cores and just utilizing those resources that are coming off of them, as well as obviously the abilities of allies and characters and stuff like that. Another big thing we should talk about quickly is that you have 2 characters that are going to start in play because the game of Power Core is 2 decks combined. Every character has a small deck of cards, and when you start a game of Power Core, you're going to pick 2 characters, combine their decks, put both their character cards in play, take their health totals, add up their health, and that is the total health that you will have for the game that your opponent is trying to bring down to 0 to win the game, and you're doing the same. Every deck also comes with avatars. Avatars do not get shuffled into the deck. Avatars are going to be in play at the bottom here. I think every character has between like 1 and 3 avatars. You're going to have them all at the bottom. They're essentially always accessible, waiting to be played. They don't start in play. That's just sort of like in your reserve. And you have to trigger an ability that says to bring an avatar into play in order to bring them into the battlefield. They're very powerful cards. They'll have a big impact on the game, and every character has their own unique avatars, and they'll kind of be working in conjunction with each other at times, or you'll be playing off each other depending on the 2 character decks that you have mixed together. The other big thing we should talk about the rules is that when you get to your action phase, you essentially have 2 actions, and one of them is, for instance, play a card. There's no mana cost. So you just play a card. You can take anything in your hand and you can play it. So if you have something you want to play, you don't have to worry about whether or not you can, or drawing lands, or anything like that we've seen in different games, or having a restriction of which house it is, like in Keyforge. You just play your cards to your battlefield. Really, the only restriction you're working with is that a battlefield has a limit on how many cards could be in it. That is 1 plus the amount that are listed on your character cards. So your character cards are going to have with something that says card slots +1 or card slots +2. You add up all those numbers, add 1 to it as your base, always having 1 allowed in your battlefield. That's the max the number of cards you can have. And that's basically all you're doing in the game. Like you're doing 2 actions that are play a card or to rotate a power core to generate more resources, which is also speeding up the death of your card essentially. But sometimes you really need those resources, and you're just trying to deplete your opponent's health, and their health again is their 2 character health combined. The interesting thing there is that even though you have 2 characters with 2 different health totals, like for instance Cthulhu here has 15 health, it's not as though you're dealing health to or dealing damage to Cthulhu, and once you hit 15 you kill Cthulhu. You can never kill off a single character. Their health totals are just there to tell you what the total health you're trying to reach is, but those 2 characters are going to be in play the entire game. You can never eliminate one of them. So that's one distinction that I think is important to kind of realize with Power Core that is different from other games I've played. And you just go through the flow of the game that way. So you're going to be playing allies, you're going to be playing spells, you're going to be playing items, you're going to be bringing avatars into play, you're going to be using character abilities, you're going to be generating all these resources with your power cores, and the first person to deplete the enemy's health wins, or if your deck runs out of cards, you lose the game as well. And the decks aren't very large, so a game of Power Core does not take very long. Okay, that's a really brief overview. If any of that sounds interesting, you're still here, you're sticking around, you want to know if you should back this, I'm going to tell you now all the things that I think are unique about Power Core that set it apart. We talked about the power cores a little bit already. I'm just going to stress again that that is the crux of the game. Everything you're doing in some way, you're going to be having to play cards effectively to generate resources with your power cores. If you don't have power cores out, you're not going to win the game. Every power core usually has a bunch of these fist icons. That's your damage. That's a big way you're going to be dealing damage to the opponent that you're playing, as well as the X icon that's on them, which is the only way you can trigger X special abilities that are on cards. You have to reach the power core to that X to be able to trigger those abilities. Those are usually really powerful and can swing the game. Generating horror was a big power core is a big way that you gain horror, and horror is used to be able to do a whole bunch of different abilities. That's one of the character abilities to bring avatars into play. Almost always need horror, so you're going to be wanting to have a supply of horror tokens that you can pay for stuff whenever you really need to. Really, you have to focus on these power cores. There is a section of power cores on the side that you'll always be pulling from whenever you play cards to your battlefield, but avatars and characters have their own unique power cores with their name on it that don't actually die off. There's no green or red side. They will permanently be in play. These will rotate endlessly, and they're usually more powerful. The things that they're generating are tied specifically to that avatar or to that character thematically, and they're usually more powerful because of it. So those coming into play is usually a big deal. Avatars can be killed when they're in play, but generally if you're putting them in, you're trying to keep them there, utilize them as much as you can, and then often they'll have an unmake ability. Unmake is essentially sacrifice that avatar to do something. So you're going to utilize that avatar as much as you can, unmake it, and then cash in some way on that unmake ability. So that's the power cores. Like I said, the other big thing right from the get-go is that there's no deck building in this. The deck building essentially is taking 2 different decks, 2 different characters, and combining their decks. So there's 8 characters in this box, which means that if even just playing Cthulhu, if I've played Cthulhu, there are 7 different characters I can mix Cthulhu with. So that's 7 different possibilities for just one character alone. Not even mentioning playing a different character, all the stretch goals. There are not endless combinations, but a lot of combinations to go through that'll make every character feel unique and add variability to the game. You may not like Cthulhu with these 2 characters, but you might love Cthulhu with these 6 characters. In that same regard, the character abilities that you're mixing together, the avatars that you're mixing together, the actual cards themselves in the deck that you're mixing together is going to change your strategy every time, depending on which, how you're achieving victory and what you're doing with the cards that are in that deck. So the variety for me is something that is, when I approach a deck build or a 2-player deck building game, variety is huge because I either want to know if the game's expandable, that I'm going to be coming back here and buying like booster packs or more decks or more cards, or it just full-on expansions like Marvel Champions, things like that. Like, is there enough for me that if I get hooked in this game that I can keep coming back and expanding, or is it going to wear thin? Right in the name, Power Core Call of Cthulhu, there is a good indication that if this is successful and if it is something that people are adamant about wanting, that we could see Power Core with a different subtitle. And this can be expanded with different expansions, or within the Call of Cthulhu line, you might be able to buy a single character deck that now you can mix with every single deck you already own. So there are expandability options if you're interested in knowing like where this game could go. I'm not guaranteeing it goes those places, but just knowing that it's possible is something that I think will be intriguing to people that are maybe potentially looking for a 2-player card battler that they can get and then kind of focus on and have it expand from there. I think that potential's here. We'll just have to see if the game is successful. Those are the two main things that make this game unique, is the way that you're building your decks and the power cores. The other one I'll touch on is just the fact that like I said, every card in your hand you can just play. You're not looking for mana cost. It's really accessible in that way. Like when you use an action, you have two actions. If you want to use both of them to play a card, you're just playing two cards to your battlefield. So you don't have to worry about can I, or should I, or whatever. I guess you do have to worry about should I, but not can I. You always can. It's just a matter of whether it's something that's effective for your strategy. It's hard. Power Core is a really hard game to talk about, and not even so much to talk about, but to explain, because when I first started playing, I came with the lens of other two-player card battlers, which is wanting to deplete your opponent's health, and that usually being because you're getting cards into play and utilizing their abilities. But everything about this game comes down to those power cores that are on the cards, and where they are, and rotating them at the right time, and maybe rotating your opponents faster so that their cards go off the board. There's a lot of steal abilities. You can steal avatars or characters from your opponent and basically bring them into your battlefield. I did that to Carlo in the first game we played, and that swung the game. The game also has a very big swings in general, at least in our experience. It started off where I just could not get an avatar into play. I was not getting the resources I needed. Carlo did. He was kind of taking over, dealing the damage he needed, and then suddenly I captured one of his avatars. It went into my battlefield. I got a bunch of his stuff off the board. I got a bunch of my stuff on, and the game swung again. To me, that's always been more interesting than a game that just says, oh, you have a good start, and you just kind of go up like this, and the other person had a bad start and they kind of level out here, and you never really feel like you had a chance. I liked in Radland specifically, for instance, how that game could have these huge momentum shifts. Suddenly, this person looks like they're completely in the lead. They've killed two of the bases. There's only one left, and all of a sudden the battlefield's cleared. Someone else gets the cards they need, and the game shifts, and it has a big change in how it plays out. Power Core felt that way in the sense that there's going to be these big ebbs and flows, hills and valleys, and to me that's always just been a little bit more interesting than just the straight shot of like this is just how the game is going to feel the whole time, or because I've deck built so efficiently, I can't be beat unless someone plays with this exact deck. I think this is going to add a little bit more intrigue, especially with all the different combinations of characters that are in the game. Those are kind of the things that make this game unique. Now, obviously, I haven't touched on everything in this game. I haven't even gotten into specific cards and in-depth rules. But I think that that's stuff that isn't necessarily what I look for when I'm looking to back a crowdfunding campaign or potentially back one. To me, it's how interested am I in this game? How does it stand up to other games of that genre? Obviously, things like cost and whatnot. And I think the biggest thing to take away from here is, if anything I explained today or showed on camera sounds interesting, sounds unique, sounds novel, sounds different, sets it apart from other two-player deck builders, and you're someone who likes two-player deck builders already, you'll probably find something to like here. However, if you aren't a fan of two-player deck builders, I don't think this is going to be the one that changes your mind. It is a little bit more accessible than games like, say, Keyforge, where Keyforge is accessible in the sense you just buy a deck and you're ready to go, but there's a lot more rules involved with Keyforge. This is a simpler game in terms of the rule set, and there's only like 3 keywords in the entire base game. One of them isn't really even a keyword. Like, it is just an easier game to kind of just start and play, and the games will go a lot quicker than a Keyforge game, for instance. So it's accessible in that way. It's potentially expandable. It does a lot of unique stuff with these power cores that I've never really seen a two-player card battler use. It reminds me in many ways of Aeon's End. If you played Aeon's End, I can't remember what they're called, if it's the rifts or whatever it is that you're rotating there. Has a bit of that kind of feel to it, but obviously Aeon's End is a different game, so it plays out differently here. But it does enough unique stuff that it sets it apart from the other games that I've played, that if you are a fan of two-player card battlers, and any of this sounds interesting to you, or you like the combining of decks and kind of finding different mixtures, you might want to look into the campaign a little bit more, or even just straight up back it for yourself. If you have any questions, go take to the comments, ask me. I'm happy to answer anything about the game or look into stuff for you. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this video and sticking around with us. We will cover more games that interest us and that we think we need to bring information to you to be able to make these decisions in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.